Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Rabbi Anibal, your host for this edition of Torah L'chaim, Parsha Mishpatim 5783. Glad to be here. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in this afternoon. And I always like this. I like when I see names nice and early, even before the class starts. So I can see here Denise Frame-Leach, welcome. Andrea Royave, welcome to the class. Brendan David Grossman, welcome. Bruhima Baim. Donna, you're here. Donna Alden Bogdan is here with us, and Randy Lodinger so far. It's amazing. If you're there, because I can see my numbers here. If you're there and you didn't say hello in the chat, if you're allowed to use the chat, please say hello. I would like to know who is on the other side of the screen. It's always good. Roberto Franco, welcome to the class. Great. And so sorry that we couldn't get together last week. Karen Farkas is here as well. I had a funeral, so I had to cancel. I had to cancel the class. I never like to cancel the class, but you know that according to Jewish law, when you have a conflict between studying Torah and doing a funeral, you always have to do the funeral first. That's the thing. So sometimes we try to move funerals around to see if we can accommodate a different time, but this time there was no way. There was no way. So unfortunately, I had to cancel the Torah L'chaim. But it was a mitzvah to do that funeral. It was a great man, and I was happy that I was able to be there with the family. And Paro Goldman is here. Welcome to the class. So because I didn't teach last week, and last week was Parsha Yitro, it was the Ten Commandments. I always like to talk, when we read the Ten Commandments in the Torah, I always like to talk about revelation and the concept of revelation in Judaism. This is something very important, very, very important. So I prepare a few texts today about God's revelation, but as we are going to see, this starts way before the revelation of the Torah on Sinai. That is not the first time God revealed to humanity. It comes from way, way, way before that. Okay, so we're going to see in a minute all that. Shelly Chochinov is here. Welcome to the class. And I'm going to wait just maybe one more minute, and then we start right away with all this beautiful text that I have for you. We're going to study from the Torah, from the Midrash, from the Talmud, some opinions of different rabbis about the topics for today. C. Sam Bailey, welcome to the class. Welcome to the class. I have my coffee ready. Do you have your coffee ready? Or you are having lunch maybe? I don't know. It's noon. I already had lunch. So this is the coffee that wraps up the lunch, right? I always learn. You always wrap up your lunch with a good cup of espresso. That's exactly what I'm doing here, following a tradition. Okay, so let's start with the class. And I want to start with talk a little bit about God's revelation. Eventually, the second half of the class, we're going to study a little bit of this week's Parsha. Okay, Parsha Mishpatim. But first, let's talk about revelation. So this is very interesting, okay? Because we read in the Torah about God's communication to humanity multiple times before Moses, before the revelation of the Ten Commandments, okay? And we think sometimes, okay, maybe it wasn't Moses, but maybe the first one was Abraham, right? We usually call him the first Jew, even though he wasn't a Jew. Because you know that the word Jew is coming from the kingdom of Judah. That is not going to happen for many centuries after the story of Abraham. Okay, at least, what is it? A couple of thousands of years. Kingdom of Judah. So the word Jew wasn't invented yet, but I use this one because that's usually the way we talk about Abraham. We say that Abraham was the first Jew. He was the first Hebrew, but it wasn't necessarily the first Jew. But I just left it there for the text so we all know what we are talking about here. So it is well known that Abraham was the first Jew. However, even a cursory reading of the Torah shows that he was not the first person with whom God spoke. Right? God communicated directly with Adam and Eve, the first people, and their son, Cain. It's interesting because we never read about God talking to Abel, and I guess he died before we had an opportunity to learn more about him. But we know for sure that God communicated with Adam and Eve, with Cain. In addition, Noah was righteous in his generation, and God spoke with him. Remember, build the ark and so forth. Now, as the Talmud points out, one purpose of God's communication with early mankind was to teach them universal laws of morality. Right? You will see that God talked to all these people to let them know what to do, and we have the understanding that everything God told them about what they should do, it was for their own good and to do good things in this world. Okay, so from early on we see God talking to people to let them know how to do good things. You would expect that people will know what is good and what is bad, but then we learn early on that that wasn't the case. That's why we had the flood. That's why we had the episode of the Tower of Babel and so forth. Okay? So it was necessary, God's revelation. But it's interesting because it's almost like God allowed humanity to try out a world without law. And some people still saying this, how you call it, anarchy, right? Well, that was the model proposed at the beginning of the Torah, and we see that it didn't really work well. Without the frame of the law, civilization had lots of problems. Okay? So, but there was God to remind humanity what was good, what was bad. Okay? Let's continue. So, there are 7 mitzvot that they are commanded to all mankind, each accompanied by its own body of law. Okay, so now we are talking about that even before, way before the Torah was revealed, the rabbis understand that the Torah encapsulates 7 laws that they should be universal. In fact, it's interesting. It's not really universal because after the Torah was revealed, those 7 laws applied to all the world, the whole world, except to the Jewish people. Jewish people gets a different set of laws that is more stringent, called the Torah. But for other nations without Torah, they are not obligated at all to fulfill the mitzvot, the commandments written in the Torah. All they have to do was to follow these 7 basic laws. Have you ever heard about that? We are talking about the laws of Noah. That's the way they are known, the laws of Noah. And in these days, the understanding is if you are not Jewish and you follow those 7 laws, you are a Noahide. It's almost like a religion by itself from the rabbi's point of view. That is called the Noahide. And it's fascinating to study, but that's not the way we do it today. Carolyn Louise Smith from Tampa, Florida. Welcome to the class. Chili's so cold. Okay. Cup of coffee. Always good. Always good. Okay, so let's talk quickly about the laws of Noah as described by the Talmud in Masechet Sanhedrin. And this is the first organized and purposeful revelation to humanity. And it's like this. Our rabbis taught 7 precepts were commanded to the descendants of Noah. And these are to establish a system of civil laws and to refrain from blasphemy, idolatry, adultery, bloodshed, robbery, and eating flesh cut from a living animals. Okay, very basic. Very basic. I will say that the most important thing about this is, number one, have a system of law, right? And we know that different countries, they are slightly different one from another, but that's okay. It's that if you get together with a bunch of people and you create a system of law to regulate your society, check. First law of Noah, you're a Noahide according to that. And then the rest is something that you should not do. Okay, so you have 1 positive commandment, 6 negative commandments. The 6 negative commandments you have to do is you have to refrain from blasphemy, idolatry. So in other words, you have to believe in one God. How do you believe in one God? How do you worship that one God, etc.? Those are details. If you believe in one God and you develop some sort of worship ritual for that one God, check, you are a Noahide, and then you have to avoid blasphemy to that one God, right? So then adultery, okay, bloodshed, do not kill, you should not kill, robbery, okay, and eating flesh from a cut from a living animal. So what it means is, if you want to eat meat, you're totally allowed. You can eat from any animal you want, even pork or anything that is forbidden to Jews. But for Noahide, you can eat everything you want. With one condition, you have to kill the animal first. That's the only condition. For Jews, it goes even more than that. That you know that it's just, we can't eat any animal we want. It has to be a specific animal. And then on top of that, it has to be slaughtered in a special way, and then we have to drain the animal for all blood. Okay? But from the Noahide, it's way easier. It's way easier to become a Noahide. So why is this so important? Because this is, according to the rabbis, a revelation before the revelation that we read last week in Parsha Yitro, when God revealed the 10 Commandments and so forth. Okay? This is a previous revelation that it affects the entire world. Any questions? Any questions? Please use the chat and I will do my best to answer. Okay? Now, the other thing is, and this is even more interesting because here we are going to the Midrash, and we are going to understand that the rabbis believe that humanity had people that they were how can I say, they were experts on the understanding of God and God's will in a way that went before the way further than the laws of Noah. Okay, let me explain how this worked. The Midrash says, Midrash Rabbah, when the nations of the world sought to depart from the ways of God, He, God, arranged that 2 of their great ancestors, Shem and Ever, should rise and chastise them. Okay? So what happened is Shem and Ever still belong to the people, that they used to live before God decided that the limit of the age for human beings are going to be 120 years, right? Remember that at the beginning people used to live like almost 900 years or so? Okay, so these were descendants of Noah, and when they were born, they were still under the category of people who live almost 900 years. Noah himself belonged to that category. Now, this is interesting. This is very interesting because if you calculate how many years were between Noah and Abraham, right? Then what you discover is that there was an overlap between Noah and Abraham. Because when Noah was very old, he was about to die, Abraham was an adult. So the Midrash put them together in the sense that maybe Abraham learned about the one God from Noah. And if it was not from Noah, maybe from Shem and Ever. Okay? Shem was one of the sons of Noah. So it's very interesting because Noah, Shem, and Ever, they live almost 900 years. Abraham was already born when people were living up to 120. But the Midrash make an overlap there. So Noah first and then Shem and Ever were the scholars the time that they were happy to teach whoever wanted to learn about the one God. And Midrash, Abraham was one of those. So how do we know also, is there any hint in the Torah that there were people, that they were scholars back then, that they were familiar with this early revelation? Well, the Torah does give us a hint. Let me show you an example. Because if you go to Genesis 25:22, right, we are talking now about the children of Jacob. Of Isaac. Isaac was Abraham's son. Well, according to the Midrash, when Isaac was born, Noah already passed away. So the two scholars of the time were Shem and Ever. Because the Torah says in Genesis 25:22, and I will read, but the children clashed inside her. That is that when Rebecca was pregnant with twins, right? She had twins. And then she felt that the two children were like fighting inside her womb. So the Torah says, but the children clashed inside her. And when this occurred, she asked, why is this happening to me? And then the Torah says, she went to seek counsel from God. Where did she go? Who would be able back then to give her counsel from God? Right? So we have a hint in the Torah that there were people that they already knew God and understood God's will. That's why the Midrash builds the whole history around Shem and Ever. So Rashi says, clashed. What does it mean, clashed? When she will pass the entrance of the Torah Academy of Shem and Ever, Jacob will wriggle around desiring to rush to come out. When she will pass the entrance of idol worship establishment, Esau will squirm to come out. Okay? She went to seek. Where did she go? She went to the Academy of Shem. Okay? And Rashi is the one connecting the dots here. Okay, we have questions in the chat. Okay. So we have who's ever, how related. And then Denise Frame said, this is a sanitary issue. What do you mean with the sanitary issue? Denise. No, basically what happened is that Rebecca was with feeling that there was something wrong with her womb. The babies were fighting in a way that it was not normal. So she thought that was a kind of a divine sign. Was a divine sign. So she went to a scholar or somebody who will be in tune with God's will to be sure if that was a divine sign. Okay? And that's why it said that she went to the Academy of Shem. So who was ever? I'm not sure. I'm not sure who ever was. Let's see. But I know there is a Oh, look at this. The cave of Shem and Ever in Sephad in Israel. Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. I'm reading here what it says. All the Ever was Shem's son. Okay, there you go. Shem's son. Okay, so but the idea with this is just for us to understand that they were the revelation before the revelation. Okay, so let's continue. Now, this is something that is more difficult to understand for us. Genesis 26:5. It says, all this is because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my decrees, and my laws. What does it mean that Abraham obeyed all the commandments? Do you understand the problem here? Because the commandments was not revealed yet. All it was revealed were the 7 laws of Noah as commandments. Of course, they were probably like a more moral commandments of what to do and not to do, like, to be a good person. But the ritual commandments, there were none, except maybe when the circumcision was added for Abraham. But here is very precise, the language in Genesis, that it says, all this because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my decrees, and my laws. Categories that eventually the rabbis will connect to all different types of mitzvot, ritual mitzvot. That's why this week's Parsha is called Mishpatim, commandments. That's one of the words that is used back in the book of Genesis. So if we are studying this week about the Mishpatim, that they were revealed this week, how is it possible that Abraham was able to observe the Mishpatim back then? Let's see what the Talmud says about this. Okay, we see that our forefather Abraham fulfilled all the mitzvot of the Torah even before it was given. As the verse states, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my decrees, and my laws. So how is it possible? That Abraham fulfilled all the commandments before the commandments were revealed? Think about that for a minute, and I will read another question here. Shelly Chochinov. He was already living a righteous life. That's why Hashem chose him. Yes, but the Torah could have said that just the way the Torah said it for example, Noah. The Torah says about Noah, Noah was a righteous person. He walked with God. And then we understand that Noah wasn't a person who the Torah tried to imply that he fulfilled all the commandments. He was a righteous person. Whatever God will tell him to do, he will do it, right? But for Abraham, we have so many words used to define the way he was fulfilling God's will that is a little weird, because it implies that he fulfilled the commandments that they were not yet revealed. So how is that possible? So in order to understand that, we have to go to another tractate of the Talmud, Tractate Yoma, page 28b, and it says, Rav says, Abraham fulfilled all the mitzvot of the Torah, as it says, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my decrees, and my laws. Rabbi Shimi Bar Chia said to Rav, well, you know what? Maybe he observed the 7 Noahide mitzvot, the one that I explained before, only. However, there is the mitzvah of Brit Milah, circumcision as well. Rav replied to him, okay. Maybe he observed the 7 plus that one. Right? Rava, and others say that it was Rav Ashi, answered, no. Abraham fulfilled even the rabbinical institution of Eruvei Tavshilin, a very specific rabbinic law regarding cooking food on holidays to be used on Shabbat. As the verse states, my Torahs in plural. That means the written law and the oral law. Now, this is very interesting. Are the rabbis trying to be factual here? Or they are trying to point to a specific principle? And I believe it's the second thing. The rabbis are trying to teach us a principle here. It says that Abraham was such a holy person, and he was so connected to God, that Abraham understood, without the need of any revelation, of what God expected humanity to do ritualistically. What kind of rituals should be practiced? In other words, the Torah was revealed to Moses and to the Jewish people because we couldn't figure it out that by ourselves the way Abraham did. That's the thing. So, in other words, they say that rabbinic institution of Eruvei Tefillin, it's cooking on holidays so you can use it on Shabbat, in the sense that sometimes you have to, because on holidays you can reheat but not cook. But if Shabbat is right after the holidays, yes, then you can cook and then use it on Shabbat, but then you have to do a special ritual in order to do that. So it's almost like Abraham understood. Of course, if I have to do something before Shabbat, I will have to kind of ask permission to do it. Now, it's also interesting that the Talmud says that Eruvei Tavshilin is connected to the holidays. And that is more complicated to understand or to justify, because even if Abraham was able to figure out all the commandments, how would Abraham know that Pesach will be a thing happening at a specific time in the month of Nisan? You understand what I mean? Or that the Torah will be revealed on Shavuot, or Sukkot will be observed a specific time, or Yom Kippur will be a specific date. How would Abraham figure that out? That's another question. And there are Midrashim trying to explain that, saying that Pesach wasn't Pesach because the time of the year for Pesach was also has a very specific energy related to freedom and so forth. So maybe if Abraham knew that truth, or that's cosmic information about the energies of the month, on the days of the month, he could have figured out that that was a time of freedom, and he kind of observed a special festival at that time. We don't know about that, but that's the whole idea. Welcome, Lee Solomon. Welcome to the class. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, now, fast forward to Egypt. Then we have the next stage of the revelation. But the revelation hasn't happened yet. The Torah hasn't been revealed yet. Ten Commandments hasn't been said yet. And we learn that even before Mount Sinai, when Moses was about to lead the Jewish people out of Egypt, God introduced the first mitzvah commanded on a national scale, the sanctification of Rosh Chodesh, okay? The pronouncing of the advent of a new month. So, additionally, mitzvot related to the Pesach, the Passover sacrifice, were also commanded prior to leaving Egypt. So when we believe that the first revelation from God to the Jewish people or to humanity was at Mount Sinai, well, that's a mistake. Because as I have showed you, there were many instances with God revealed some kind of the divine will to people way before that. God did it with Adam and Eve. God did it with Noah. God did it with Shem and Ever. God did it with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and even with Moses and the Jewish people before the revelation on Sinai. And that's how they knew what to do for the first Passover Seder, that it was in Egypt. Any questions about this? Because now I would like to move into this week's Parsha and to study a little bit of the Mishpatim, the laws that they are presented to us in this week's Torah portion. Okay, so I'm going to open here, and this is very interesting. Okay, it says, this is in Exodus 24:1-4. Let me read it and then we talk about it. Adonai said to Moses, "Come up to Adonai, you, Aaron, Nadab, Avihu, and the 70 of the leaders of Israel, prostrate yourself at a distance, while Moses alone approaches Adonai. The others are not to approach, and the people are not to go up with him. Moses came and told the people everything Adonai had said, including all the rulings. The people answered with one voice, "We will obey every word Adonai has spoken." Okay? Moses wrote down all the words of Adonai. He rose early in the morning, built an altar at the base of the mountain, and set upright 12 large stones to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. And now Rashi explained, what does it mean that he wrote down all the words of Adonai? Well, Rashi explains everything from Genesis until the giving of the Torah, as well as all as the mitzvot that they were commanded at Marah. This section was related before the giving of the 10 commandments. Okay? So this is very interesting, and I wanted to present to you. This is almost at the very end of the Parsha this week, when this is the source that the rabbis will use to explain that the Torah was dictated to Moses. And it was done so in installments. It wasn't done all at once. So this is the first time that God said to Moses, "Okay, Moses, get ready. I'm going to dictate to you the content of the Torah." So the first section will be God telling Moses everything that happened in the book of Genesis, that we don't really know if Moses was familiar with that. So it's now God telling Moses, "I will tell you about Adam, Eve, Noah, Shem, Ever, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All the details. What I say to you, you write it down." So that was the first stretch. Plus, of course, all the laws that happened before they left Egypt, right? All the laws of Passover, and a little bit more about what happened in Marah before the revelation of the 10 Commandments. So basically, it's almost like God dictated to Moses all the Torah readings up to before last week's Parsha. Okay? This is the source. This is the source that we do it. Now, this is very interesting because this text, Exodus 24:1-4, is going to be, and it depends how you understand these words, literally or as a metaphor. Okay? Depends how you understand these words. You will kind of decide what kind of Judaism you will practice. You will decide if you're an Orthodox Jew, a conservative Jew, or a Reformed Jew. Have you ever thought about that? It depends on, what kind of understanding you have of this. If you believe that these are literal words, and God actually dictated word by word everything from Genesis until right before Revelation, and Moses was, writing it down, then regardless of your lifestyle, your theology is an Orthodox theology. Right? It's very interesting. Very interesting. Then there are many things in between. That's what I said, that it will determine if you are Orthodox, conservative, or Reform. Yeah. And then it will be all the times that God, so the way it was done is after this, every time that God wanted to communicate something to Moses, God will call Moses to the tent of the meeting, that it was part of the tabernacle, and God will dictate there other things. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, so let's continue now. I want to go specifically, Shelley, before we go to the next one. Who you are in your heart does not necessarily match how you live your daily life. Of course not. You can have, or you could believe in an Orthodox theology in the sense that everything in the Torah is literal, but you can still not practice that. In other words, you would say that you maybe are not a good Orthodox Jew, but at a belief level, you do believe in that theology, right? The conservative movement will believe that there was communication between God and Moses, but conservative movement also believe in human editing along history, to the point that sometimes we cannot be sure how faithful the text that we have is to the original. It's almost like there were many originals, and at one point people got together trying to put the pieces together to figure out the God's will. But when that happened, and you have human creativity and interpretations mixed up with that, then you can't really be sure. So then, you have to take a little leap of faith into believing what is passed down to you. In general, the Reform approach is more pragmatic in the sense that I won't speak for every Reformed Jew, but mostly they will reject the concept of understanding this Parsha, for example, literally, that it was this kind of dictation from God to Moses. Okay? They will reject that altogether. And it was all a human creation. Let me say that it's a divinely inspired but human creation. And I don't want to go there because it gets complicated when we talk theology from that point of view. Okay? So let's go now to one specific teaching from this week's Parsha. One specific Mishpat. One specific law. Here it says, if you see the donkey of someone you hate, and you feel like refraining from assisting him, you must, nevertheless, help him. Okay? This is in this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha. So you can understand that the Torah presents not only mitzvot, that they are ritual in nature, but also mitzvot that they are intended to regulate our interaction with other members of society in order to make or to create a better society. Because this verse from Exodus 23:5 is a verse that it was revealed to humanity in order to avoid animosity between people. And we know that the Torah will say it more specifically, you should not keep any grudges, you should love your neighbor as yourself, right? But yeah, that's beautiful words, but here the Torah has been more specific about details. Because you know what people say about details, right? That's usually with everything start failing, and the details. So here we have the details, some of the details on how we practically, in real life, avoid hating our neighbor. So if you see the donkey of someone you hate, and you feel like refraining from assisting him, you must nevertheless help him. So what is interesting here is the Torah acknowledges that we may feel things about other people. It's very difficult to command. You should not hate. How do you command the feeling? Even though the Torah does that, right? That when it says you should love your God. But even when the Torah says you should love your God, it's talking not about the feeling, but about what does it mean in the practice. What do you have to do to express love? And this is the same. You may hate somebody in your heart, and while you figure out how to cleanse your mind so you will not hate, while you do that, you should have a specific behavior. In this case, even if you hate somebody and if you see that the person needs help, even with your funny feelings, go and help him. Okay? And it's interesting that God understands that this has to be revealed, divinely revealed, because otherwise we wouldn't figure it out. Because remember, the Torah, God reveals things that otherwise we may not figure out. There are other things that they are pretty obvious that the Torah will never reveal. This one seems to be not so obvious, that God has to reveal it. Okay? So, this commentary from the Hiskuni, he says, you are warned not to remain inactive when faced with the animal's distress, even if its owner is your enemy. This interpretation is also hinted at in Rashi's commentary on Deuteronomy 13:9, where he emphasizes that one's enemy is exempt from the commandment to love your fellow man as yourself. Okay? It's interesting. Again, remember I was talking about your feelings. But even if you cannot develop feelings as to love your neighbor, nevertheless, you have to be careful with your actions. Okay? With your actions. And in this case, the Hiskuni said, look, you may hate your neighbor, but how is that, what fault does the poor donkey have that you cannot get along with your neighbor? Right? If you think that not helping the donkey is a good way to pay back your neighbor, you're a fool, because you're not realizing that in the process, there is a poor animal that is suffering. So we have to be very careful with this. It's yeah. Shelley, you said you must help not only the man but also the animal. Yeah, it's interesting because here is mostly the animal. Is the animal the one that is suffering here? The animal belongs to your neighbor. The animal is suffering. So even if you hate your neighbor, go help the animal. And the same thing, could be with objects. If something belongs to your neighbor and you find it, just go and return it. Right? Pirkei Avot will touch a little bit of that, Shelley. Yes. Okay, let's continue with the next text. I like this. Now, this is a perfect example, or like a specific example of how this works in real life. So let me share with you this story that happened to Rabbi Israel Salanter. Okay? It goes like this. Rabbi Israel Salanter was traveling by train from Salant to Vilna and was sitting in a smoking car holding a lit cigar. Back in the day when smoking was allowed, right? This is like, I think, when did he live? In the 1800s. Now, a young man accosted him by yelling about the putrid odor of the smoke. Other passengers were confused. After all, they were in the smoking car. Despite that, Rabbi Salanter extinguished the cigar and opened the train's window to dissipate the fumes. It was only a few seconds before the young man slammed the windows down while screaming at the elderly sage for opening it. Rabbi Salanter apologized profusely to the man, young enough to be his child, and buried himself in a Jewish book of law. Upon arriving in Vilna, the young man was horrified to see hundreds of people gather to receive one of Europe's most prominent rabbis. He was sitting next to this rabbi. He didn't know who Rabbi Salanter was. Very funny. So the man immediately ran to the home where Rabbi Salanter was staying. He began to beg forgiveness. Don't worry, explained Rabbi Israel. A trip can make one edgy. I bear no ill will. Tell me, continued the rabbi, why did you come to Vilna after all? The young man explained that he was looking to become an ordained shochet, a slaughterer, and an approbation from a Vilna rabbi will be universally accepted. Rabbi Salanter smiled. Ha! My own son-in-law, Rabbi Eliar Lazer, can ordain you. He's a rabbi in Vilna. Rest up, and tomorrow you can take the test. The next day, it was apparent that the man needed more than rest, for he failed miserably. However, that did not deter Rabbi Salanter. He encouraged the man to try again. For the next several weeks, Rabbi Israel arranged for tutors and prepared the young man well enough to pass Rev Elijah Lazer's makeup exam, along with the test of a host in other well-known Vilna rabbis. He even arranged for the man to get a job. Before leaving Vilna, the man appeared before Rabbi Israel with tears in his eyes. Tell me, Rebbe, he cried, I was able to understand that you could forgive me for my terrible arrogance on the train. But why did you help me so much? That I can never understand. Rabbi Israel sat him down, held his hand and explained. It's easy to say, I forgive you. But deep down, how does one really know if he still bears a grudge? Way down in my heart, I actually was not sure. The only way to remove a grudge is to take action. One who helps another develops a love for the one he aided. By helping you, I created a true love, which is overwhelmingly more powerful than the words, I forgive you. So this is very interesting because it's a fact. It's a fact that sometimes an action can change the way we think and the way we feel. That's why sometimes, when you feel a little bit down, a little bit depressed, sometimes a friend will tell you, you know what, go for a walk. Or come with me, let's go to the park. Or let's go play games or something. And then at the end of the day, you realize that you don't feel sad anymore. What is that? Because the action changed the way you feel. And sometimes it's the opposite. Because basically the way you feel will affect the way you act and the way you think. Now, the way you think can also affect the way you feel, the way you act, right? And the way you act will affect the other two. Each one of these three elements, feeling, thought, and action, affect each other. So when you're failing in one of the three, you have to do something with the other two to change the first. You understand? So sometimes if you have bad feelings and you feel that you are stuck and you cannot do anything, you can engage in some kind of intellectual activity to help you overcome whatever you are feeling or your inaction. That's because, so this is a perfect example. And that's why the Torah will say, you hate your neighbor, then the donkey is suffering, go help the guy by helping the donkey. Number one, because it's not the donkey's fault, but by doing something for somebody else, you may even change the way you feel for that person. Andrea, you said kind of cognitive behavioral therapy. Okay, if that's the name, I take your word for it. But you see, we love this. Yeah. Okay. You see, we love fancy names in this generation. But back in the times of the Torah, we had that concept. And that's why we have all these commandments. That whenever we feel one way, the Torah will ask us to do specific things in the hope that we change the way we feel. And that is not just to prevent us from hating somebody else, but also to develop love for God and so forth. Okay? So, great to put a name to the concept. Cognitive behavioral therapy. That sounds way cooler than whenever we're reading the Talmud or in the Torah. Okay? So, and I have one more thing that I wanted to share with you, and it's this one. This is one of my favorite passages on the Torah because it's also talking about the way we feel and the way we express ourselves. It says, if someone removes the cover from a cistern or digs one and fails to cover it, right? If you dig a hole on the street and you forget to cover it, right? And an ox or a donkey falls in, the owner of the cistern must make good the loss by compensating the animal's owner, but the dead animal will be his. Okay, so in other words, you have to be very careful. It's talking about the bore. A bore is a hole or a cistern, right? When you dig a hole, if you create an accident by the hole you dug in this public property or places where people pass by, then you are responsible. You are responsible for any accident happening under your watch. Okay, you understand this? Very important. Very important. And I could leave it there and you will say, yeah, the Torah is great. So smart. Of course it's like that. If it's your fault, because you should be more careful to cover it so people won't suffer from your action. Right? Now, but what is interesting is this verse has two different teachings. At least two different teachings. Number one, like this. You see, the Talmud says, we learn in the Baraita, a person should not throw stones from his property into public grounds. It happened that a person was throwing stones from his property into the public domain. A pious man passed by and said to him, "Foolish one, why are you throwing stones from property that does not belong to you into ground that does belong to you?" The man laughed at him. As time went by, you understand, he was throwing stones from his house to the street. And then the pious man, this person said, "Why are you throwing stones from a place that does not belong to you, that is your house?" And you say, "What do you mean the house doesn't belong to me? Of course the house belongs to me, right? Why are you throwing stones from property that does not belong to you onto grounds that does belong to you?" He said, "The public domain belongs to you." I said, "No, it does not belong to me. It's public, right?" So that's why he laughed at him. So as time went by, he had to sell his field, and when he was walking on those public grounds, stumbled over his own stones. He then exclaimed, "That pious man was right when he said to me, 'Why are you throwing stones from ground that does not belong to you and to ground that does belong to you?'" So in other words, what it says here, and this is amazing, and it's all coming from the explanation of the verse that I read before, that we have to be very careful to what we do to public property, because eventually it affects us as well. So this verse is talking not only about digging a hole, throwing stones, but also taking care of the environment, because we all benefit from it, or we all suffer from it if there is something wrong. So we have to be very careful. Don't think that it's something that belongs to somebody else, because at the end of the day, it belongs to you as well. And this is teaching number one that we learn from that verse of digging a cistern or a hole. Okay? There is another one. There is another one that is also very practical. And this also was a teaching of Rabbi Israel Salanter, the same one that I was smoking on the train. He said, one's face has the status of a Reshut Harabim, public domain. If one walks around with a sour look on his face is a bore, Birshut Harabim, a pit, a cistern, a hole in a public area. And he is responsible for any damage caused to someone who falls or hurts himself on account of his pit. In other words, what Rabbi Israel Salanter is, when you walk around on the street, the way your face expresses things can affect other people's moods. So if there is somebody who is in a great mood, but you are going around with a sour face, right? And then because of your face, the other person now is in a bad mood, it's your fault. That's what Rabbi Israel Salanter says. That's why Israel Salanter used to teach all his students that it's very important for us to get used to smile at everyone. In fact, the Mishnah will say that as well, that we have to get used to smile at everyone. Because if you're going around with a sour face, and then because of your face, people's mood changed to the worse, it's your responsibility. Your face is in public domain, and it's like a bore. It's like a pit, an open cistern. And you have to be careful that nobody get hurt because of that. Okay? So, that's what I had to teach for you. 1:01 p.m. Almost. I'm 1 minute late. Sorry for that. So, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today. And remember, this class is going to be rebroadcasted tonight at 8 p.m. Okay? If you haven't subscribed to our channels, please subscribe to our channel. Hit that subscribe button. Then if you're on YouTube, after you subscribe, you have to hit the bell so you will be notified every time we go live or every time we upload something to our channels. Give us the thumbs up, leave a comment, share this class with somebody else if you want. And until we see each other again, please have a wonderful time, stay safe, and hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone.